Welcome, everybody, to Counter Clipping episode 264 for April 6th, 2026. And yes, I am having a bad hair day, but I'm getting a haircut tomorrow. So just to get that question out of the way, we're going to talk about the American Civil War at the strategic level tonight. And I have a selection of games to go through. But before we get started with any of that, let's mention that we are clipping still 1914 Twilight in the East. The Austro-Hungarians, as well as the Germans, are now finished, but there are about 17 million Russians to do yet. So thanks for the reminder about the ticker. There we go. And I'll remind everybody to please do like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. I did promise a giveaway this week, didn't I? Only I didn't prepare for that, so we'll do the 10,000 subscriber giveaway next Monday. How about that? It'll be something good, but not necessarily large or expensive to ship. So we'll be doing that. There's also a bunch of ways to support the channel down listed in the video description, and a big shout out in apropos of that to our patrons. The patrons of Ardwulf's Lair are the thing that keeps this channel in operation. And our good friends from Noble Knight Games, the official sponsor of the Counter Clipping show, are also very welcome as our official sponsors. And we'll, of course, hear from Noble Knight later on. So we'll see about this. Now is not the time for that. Let me put it that way. Perhaps in the summer, which is when I typically do the giant mutton chops. For those who haven't seen them, there probably are on video somewhere. Well, they're definitely on video somewhere. I'm just not sure they're on video in a counter clipping show. But they will return. I can grow an extremely respectable pair of sideburns, but I don't really grow hair right here, and my hair up here is kind of weak. So growing a whole beard is just not something that I seem to be able to do. So, and we are drinking. This is the last. I figured we would do this since there's only about one pour left of it. This is the Michter Small Batch, bottled at 45.7%. This is excellent, and this is what I used for the home aging experiment. So that's what I've been drinking for the last couple of weeks. So we'll see. One time, I know she had the history wrong, but I really appreciated the sentiment. One time when I had the sideburns, I showed up at my sister's place for something, and she said, "Oh my God, you look like President Buchanan." And I know that she really meant General Burnside, but here we are. So I appreciated the historical reference, even if it wasn't the right historical reference from anybody in my family, let me tell you. Anyway, very nice. Vince Ree is sipping Willett's 4-year cask strength rye, bottled 52%. That sounds fantastic. This would have fit perfectly well with tonight's topic, strategic level American Civil War. And I've got about 12 games that I'm going to specifically talk about or mention, most of which I have at least some experience with. But definitely not all of them. There's a couple more that I have, but haven't really done anything with yet. So, if your local Costco sells booze, buy it there because it's usually good stuff. I don't know what the Kirkland Isla is, but there's a fairly good chance that it's Kalila, just because of the way that gets processed. And Kalila is one of my personal favorites, actually. I don't have a bottle of it on hand right now. So, but we are going to deal with games that are about the American Civil War and that are at the strategic level and cover more or less the entire war, with different degrees of success, as I think we'll see as we get into that. Now, because I've only got 12 games here, let's make the assumption that this isn't going to take me more like 2 hours to go through this. So this might be an hour of talking about the American Civil War at the strategic level, and another however many minutes it is of my bullshit. So stay tuned for that. So, all right. Yeah, this is why I need a haircut. So if I after today's shower, I did not put any product in it, so it kind of goes in all of the directions. No, it's not top shelf, but it's usually decent and exceptionally decent for the price that Costco charges for it. Unfortunately, here in Ohio, we do not have the ability to buy booze at Costco, which is goddamn unfortunate. So, all right. Ooh, Alexander Marine Company. They are an independent bottler. I've had their Kregeliki, I think, and it was pretty good. So, all right, we are definitely going to mention this because I like this game a lot, but that is only one of the 12 games or so that we have here today. That's my Costco situation is not a Costco thing; it's an Ohio thing. It's just the way the liquor laws work here in this backward ass state. So, and a big thanks, if I haven't mentioned this already, and I don't mention this enough, to our intrepid moderators at Stacking Limit and Danny Seckery. So thanks, guys, for helping out. It's much appreciated. All right, so yes, and in fact, there is a conveniently located giant liquor store called the Party Source, basically directly across the river from Cincinnati. It is the size of an old Kmart and has nothing but booze and booze-related stuff. So if you're in that neighborhood, the Party Source I forget what the name of the town is in Kentucky, but it's like right across the bridge from Cincinnati. And you take a left and there you are. So, all right. Will Kingmaker made the cut? Not tonight. What can I say? This is American Civil War. It says American Civil War on the title card, folks. Even if that's not the video title, they are not necessarily always the same. Sometimes I need something catchy for the thumbnail, and I get to explain a little more about what it is that I mean in the actual video title. So no English Civil War tonight. Maybe we'll do something on that at some point, but in order for that to happen, I would need to play an American English Civil War game, and I haven't. So here we are. All right, so let's why is that not working? Okay, here we go. All right, so we are going to start with the oldest game on the list by a lot. This is 1961's Civil War, designed by Charlie Roberts and published by Avalon Hill. Now, this is a super duper, other than having a hex grid, and by the way, it isn't the first game to appear with a hex grid as far as I'm aware. This is pretty much standard, board games in 1960s type of game here, as far as I can tell. Interest, I've never played this. I've never owned this. I have if somebody had a copy, I would and said, hey, I want to try this, I would probably try it. And here's the map. And it's, of course, a mounted map. This may have been one of the big box Avalon Hill flats as well. So Cincinnati doesn't. You have to cross the state line into Kentucky to get to the Party Source. So, all right, Doug says it's, and he's been there as well, so he knows it's actually apparently Florence, Kentucky. I hope not. I certainly hope not. Oh, nice. This is Jeff T's first American Civil War game was Parker Brothers 1863. I've never even seen that, to be honest about it. So anyway, I haven't played or really looked particularly closely at this particular Civil War game, but it does cover the whole thing, and it looks really, really simple. But you can see that there's like a Avalon Hill 1960s CRT on here too, so it's a little more complicated than just pawns moving around. Nevertheless, as we can see from this rating, not an incredibly highly regarded title. Not that BGG ratings are always useful, but 5.8 actually sounds about right to me. Now, I do think this is a somewhat important game. It was another thing that Avalon Hill did to capitalize on the great success of its original Gettysburg game. All right. Oh, Jake, nice. Perigy's first Civil War game was Rebel Fury. Perhaps you too can have all your money spent by Mark Herman. I'll get to that. I've told the story before. So oh, nice. Aaron, thanks for stopping by. Good to see you here. Mandarin Mike says that the Parker Brothers 1863 is actually a fairly decent game, stackable plastic pieces. I have no idea. I'm actually surprised by this too. There was a Napoleonic Risk produced at some point. I can tell you, like an explicitly Napoleonic Risk. Heritage Battle Cry might have been older, but I'm not absolutely sure. When we said Battle Cry up thread, I immediately jumped to the Richard Borg Battle Cry that was produced much later by Avalon Hill. But one of the American Heritage Series games from, I think, Milton Bradley was called Battle Cry as well. And I'm not sure what it covered. I've never really investigated it. All right, Brant's next Civil War game will be his first Civil War game. You know, I'm just going to point out here that Brant was guilty and convicted of playing a Napoleonic game at Buckeye Game Fest. So we will, in fact, dragoon Brant into a Civil War game at some point. It will happen. It's just a matter of time. And or my willingness to bully him. Now, I will additionally mention that there's a game store near us here called Nine Realms Comics and Games, I think, which is it seems like it's better for comics than games, but I don't buy comics, so I'm not sure I'm right about that. But they've got like an upstairs with a bunch of old junk in it, and up there is a copy of the Avalon Hill Civil War. I didn't really look closely at it. I've kind of peeked in the box at some point in the past, but I forget what they wanted for it. And of course, you'd have to figure out whether it's complete or not, but that may or may not be particularly challenging given what I see of the components on this. All right. So, yes, indeed, he is busted. And we got it on video, pictures, everything. There is court admissible evidence here, folks. All right. So, the next one is going to be the second oldest game on the list. And this is 1974's American Civil War by Jim Dunnigan, released by SPI. And this was originally released in S&T, and I think they did do a flat version of it as well. If we look at the counters, it is just shocking how nice these counters look on some, but not all of these really old SPI games. These are quite decent, I think. Now, the map that's not the whole map. Here's the whole map. It's not the prettiest map in the world, and maybe wasn't even the prettiest map in wargaming in 1974, but still, it's not bad. And I'm pretty sure I've got this in the magazine version. This game has been redone by Decision Games at least twice, and I think one of those is a more or less straight reproduction of the original, and the other one is basically a complete redesign. And I think both of those appeared in much later S&Ts as well. This is one, it's I don't know that it's a classic. I don't know that it's iconic, but I'd kind of like to play it since I took the trouble to go run down a copy. That's not exactly what happened. It was in a pile of old S&Ts that were being sold at very good prices at some point, and I grabbed it. So interesting looking game. Also not a high rating, but I'm less assured that rating means much in this particular case. And again, this ain't bad looking for 1974. So, all right, Para G has Swords and Bayonets sitting on his shelf looking pristine. You do. You obviously need to sit at the feet of great clipping guru Stigler to learn proper clipping technique. So, I don't know that I have much more to say about this one. Like I said, it's on my list of things that I would like to play. I think, honestly, anything that Dunnigan did in this particular era is probably worth a look, even if some games are going to naturally be more successful than others. And it's got I think, a very catchy looking cover too, where Redmond Simonson was the best that I have ever seen at presenting text as graphical elements on your game cover. So, All right, so moving on. This is probably, although I didn't double check this, the third oldest game on this list, and it is one that I have played. War Between the States. This is an Irad Hardy design released by SPI in 1977. And in this case, I can verify that it was released both in the flat tray, it might have been a double flat tray, and I think it was, and in the 4-inch bookcase soapbox, which is the version I have it in. Now, this was also redone later by Decision. And in this particular case, it is pretty much a straight reprint of the original game, including the mistakes that had been addressed by the original errata in at least some cases. So I've got both versions of the game. I think it is a pretty good game, and I do want to do some video on it at some point down the line. I've been trying to think about that for quite a while. Brother Against Brother must have been so low in the list that I was culling this from on BGG that I didn't see it. I might have put it on this list, actually, because it did, it does, I believe it is a strategic level Civil War game. Not every game on this list is got a hex map, but most of them do, because those are the games that I tend to play. And therefore have something interesting to say about. Now, I did think that War Between the States had a couple of significant problems, but it also had some really interesting ideas in it. For one thing, it is really very much built on the War in the East second edition system that had been published before this. So there were certain structural elements, like the way the turns work, that you will 100% recognize from either War in the East or War in Europe. And I guess War in the West as well. And also, I will point out that War in the Pacific inherits a lot of the same sort of architecture as well. That said, everything else, like all the detailed rules about in the game, are not particularly similar to the way they were in War in Europe, but there are a fair number of similarities that people familiar with both games will spot. So one of the things that I think didn't work particularly well, and this is 3 maps and, I don't know, 1,800 counters or something like that. I don't know if it actually says that on here. This says 1,200, which I will accept that number. So it's a lot of counters. It's on 3 maps. There are a couple of different full map sized off map displays. I think there's 2 of them that will hold the production spirals, which is another thing that I believe first showed up in War in Europe and or one of its components. And as well as a bunch of like leader tracks and things like that. So there's one of the things that bugged me is just the way the game's tempo works. And unfortunately, that is kind of a problem with its scale. You've got do we have an image of the entire map here? This is a good chunk of it. All right, so you can see how small the hexes are here, I think. And in order to cover this, and the turns are weekly, by the way. In order to make this work, you have units which are like regular divisions and brigades and stuff, but they kind of act like strength points and steps. Where if a division takes damage, it might get downgraded as far as a brigade, right? And I think regiments might be the lowest level you can have. And of course, there's some differentiation for cavalry as well. But on the leader counters, you have, and I don't remember the exact term used, you have basically a leadership rating, which is a roll on a d6 to see if that leader does anything. So right off the top, this sounds okay, but because the turns are weekly and you're not moving like 15 hexes across this map unless you are on a boat or something like that, or on rail. What that means is that leaders with low leadership ratings tend to never do anything. And in order to actually do anything like move, you need to roll the leadership value or more, as I recall. McClellan's leadership value is a 1. So that said, all that means is you can't activate that guy on that roll. You also draw a certain number of activations on an activation chit. So for movement purposes, you can say, hey, Here's McClellan. I'm giving him one of my movement activations so that he will move this turn instead of me rolling a 5 again. The issue comes, and so far this works okay, although in terms of tempo, it's still a little on the sluggish side. Well, we've got the Ozarks in here too, so the map is simplifying the terrain slightly. I think automatic first leader activation. Well, I mean, yeah, but you've got you actually, I believe, spend your automatic activations first, and then you can roll for any additional leader that you haven't moved yet. I think that's how it works. It's been a few years. The problem is that you also have to roll leadership to actually get into a battle. And I, with McClellan, never managed to actually fight a battle. So he got shuffled off to live in Cincinnati or something like that. So that's kind of an issue that makes the tempo feel maybe even more sluggish than it actually is. I think what I would suggest as a possible fix, which is of course redesigning the initiative system completely, would be to make this a sort of impulse-driven game where you alternate moving individual leaders, and then turns are probably monthly, and then maybe you have a fatigue number or something like that, or you can only activate any given stack at some number of times. I don't think it was. I don't think that's an unfixable problem, but it isn't something that you can fix as easily as a house rule without monkeying with the numbers on the counters, which I do not like to do. So, well, we're doing McClellan a favor here, aren't we? I will point out, we'll get to this in a minute. John C., thanks for stopping by from the sunny Philippines. I agree with this. I haven't seen anything else that does the Far West, but there are individual games on the American Civil War in the West, and none of those are on this list. I think Eric Lee Smith's The Civil War is the only one that does. So interesting things that this game does. So you have resources, you have manpower, and I think supplies, and these are what they sound like. You use manpower to build or rebuild units, okay? And you have a pool of manpower points. So right at the beginning of the war, you're going to be able to build some units, except that you are going to run out of manpower. So in order to get more manpower, you have to start doing additional waves of calling for volunteers, or even later on in the game, hopefully, doing a draft, which has a big impact on both sides' morale, but especially the Union. I really kind of liked that mechanism. And there's a number of other things in the game that I also really did like. I think this is a game that has a lot of potential, but it really probably just needs a development pass by a modern developer to kind of smooth over its rough edges and maybe make the flow of the game happen a little better. All right. So this is also true, and this is another neat thing. So as the game goes on, you will eventually be able to create corps and armies. Corps pretty soon. I think armies in mid 1862, I believe. And those will give you the ability to move more volumes of troops around more efficiently too. So I will point out we should probably do a whole show on McClellan, but I probably would want an actual expert on McClellan at that point. And then that would be an interview, so we wouldn't be doing it on this show. But I will agree that to some extent, McClellan does get a bit of a bad rap. Worse rap than he deserves. All right, next up, we are now out, as far as I'm aware, of chronological order here. We have War for the Union. This is a Rob Beaumont design. It was originally published by Clash of Arms with a Rick Barber map and has been redone by Compass. And this one is the Compass version. Stylistically, the maps are quite similar, and I don't actually know what the differences are between the two versions of the game. This is the one that I've got. I don't have the Clash of Arms version. But this is definitely not Rick Barber, although there's a nod to Rick Barber in the sort of honeycomb-looking mountains that are on this map. All right. Brent says, provocative statement. Strategic level ACW games suffer from the same scale mismatch that global World War II games do. Eastern theater more compressed than Western, much like ETO versus PTO. If we're talking about, remember, Western theater, like George is in the Western theater, right? So I think don't read too much into Western theater. If we are talking about the Trans-Mississippi, then yes, and frankly, most strategic level Civil War games either ignore that, or meaning the entire Trans-Mississippi, or at least that part of it that took place outside of Kansas, because some important stuff happens in Kansas and Louisiana. But like beyond the boundaries of this map that we're looking at on screen right now, yeah, mostly that gets ignored, or abstracted into a card or an off-map box or something like that. So, all right, we're checking on the chat. I will also remind you, Stigler, as you are aware, Robert E. Lee lost to McClellan, so just not at any Gettysburg. Or well, he wasn't there at Gettysburg, but Antietam. All right. William Aarons, thanks for stopping by. He says that Avalon put out The Struggle of Nations that had a hex map where the hexes were smaller than the counters. Yes, kind of. So what's on that map, it's an atrociously done game, by the way. The boards are hideously warped. It's in that period when Avalon Hill had huge problems with board warping. The game system looks fine. It is the Campaigns of Napoleon system by Kevin Zucker. But what Struggle of Nations does is it has the units and leaders have regular half-inch counters, okay? But the units that you move, all that is kept on off-map displays, and the units that you move around on the map occupy 2 hexes, and those counters are a half-inch by a quarter-inch. They are very difficult to handle if you have large and sausagey fingers like I do. This was an interesting idea that didn't work out, and that does mean that the hexes are super, super tiny, right? The hexes are like designed for quarter-inch counters, and the map moving units occupy 2 of those hexes at a time. Again, neat idea. I don't think this really worked in practice for physical reasons. I've got it. I would like to play it at some point, but I'm probably going to blow the map up and make my own unit counters. So John C. says this Struggle of Nations made him stop wargaming for a while. I'm not sure what the answer is to Jeff Beeler's question, which games have fixed leader appearances and promotions? So War Between the States definitely does not. I am reasonably confident that other than possibly some counter-dressing, the American Civil War from SPI doesn't. And honestly, I'm not sure I remember what War for the Union does. I think that they are not fixed. We will get to this question very shortly, actually, when we talk about 2 otherwise quite similar games that I'm going to move around now. So, War for the Union, it's in my library. I'd like to try it, actually. From what I have looked at of it so far, which is not nothing, it does seem like it's worth a whirl, and it does look like it has some interesting features and mechanics. So I'd kind of like to give it a try. All right. Drew Detterer, Drew, thanks for stopping by. As we reached a game that games out the political side of the war. I'm not sure I would have included a game like that on this list. If there is such a game, I would be interested in hearing about it. I can, of course, mention Fort Sumter, which kind of does this up until the start of the war. But to me, that was kind of out of scope for this particular conversation. So, all right. And as, well, we'll get to that in a minute. Now, here's one that I had forgotten about. This is C.S.A, America's Civil War, a 2008 release from Platinum Dragon Productions by Wes Ernie and Ben Madison. And the only reason this is on this list, otherwise it looks reasonably obscure, but we can get a look at the map here. And, you know, it's it's an indie game quality map, and I have no problem with it on that basis. The interesting thing here is the design team, Wes Ernie and Ben Madison, and per the description, it says it's actually got some similarities to Death in the Trenches, which in turn has similarities to Absolute Victory that the two did together for Compass as well. So in both of those games, I think the most interesting thing that the game has going on is the events system. And this has an event system as well. And that does kind of make me want to investigate it. I haven't looked at this at all. So we're going to see. Noble Knight has it for $50, which doesn't sound too bad. Don't forget to use the affiliate link if you're going to go buy this right now. We're not looking at individual condition right now, but the game looks interesting. For that reason alone, I'd be very curious to see what Civil War events are available and how the determination of those events is done. That would be very interesting. I think David Imperato, thanks for stopping by, may have a good point here in comparing McClellan to Sobel from Band of Brothers. So, who did not have a happy ending after the war. So, well, yeah, they should have put him in charge of recruitment, but that wasn't something that McClellan's ego would have allowed. All right, so moving on, so I've chosen to talk about both of these in one shot because there is a new combined version that's coming from Compass. This is Mr. Lincoln's War. This is a Mark McLaughlin design. It uses a very similar system to 1776 and Mark's own War and Peace, which is another classic, except it covers the American Civil War. Now, originally, this was released as two separate games, boxed games from 3W, Army of the Potomac and Army of the Tennessee. And this was another project that was marred by its physical presentation. The maps on the original games looked bad. They warped terribly. They were mounted maps, mind you. As far as I'm aware, those are the only mounted maps 3W ever did. In contrast, I have high confidence that the game out of Compass will be both very pretty and preserve the quite nice game system that Mark McLaughlin developed for it in the first place. So I'm not sure how much detail we're getting in here. This isn't incredibly high res, but here we are. This would be the army of, well, this would be one of the two maps. I'm not sure that the map orientation is actually identical between the two editions of the game. But this is pretty much going to cover the entire American Civil War up to a bit past the Mississippi. And then, as you'd kind of expect, we have, Cincinnati's up in here. So, and we're going to get down to the bottom of Georgia is what that map covers. We'll be getting to it in a minute. So anyway, Mr. Lincoln's War. I had the two old ones, and we never played them because of the horrific pieces. But I think this is going to be a very solid pickup, and I'm very interested in seeing Compass's edition of it. Since really, I think it maybe needs an editing pass and maybe some errata incorporation, but otherwise, I think the game system is probably going to be 100% fine. If we look at the counters, they are pretty standard manpower counters or strength point counters. We can see we've got up to 20 here. We've also got ironclads and boats and other things. So this is what I'm looking forward to. This ought to be out pretty soon. I think Compass is actually either shipping it now or about to start. We're going to get to this too. John Paniski's Mr. Lincoln's War. So yeah, this is, there's a couple of games that do, I'll say this since Jonathan Dyer has mentioned it. Thanks for coming. Okay. So, let's talk to Jonathan Dyer here first. We will mention it's not Mr. Lincoln's War. It's called Lincoln's War, and we will get to it in a minute. And this is an interesting looking game. And both this and For the People will handle the political side of the war through the cards. I think that's an accurate summary of Lincoln's War as well, which I have not played and have never owned or really closely looked at other than to watch over somebody's shoulder playing it at a convention. But I have played For the People several times at this point. All right. Danny Secretary says that Mr. Lincoln's War is out in the wild. Out. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So this is one that we're linking for. Look, let's see what we have back here. Yeah, this is the original Army of the Potomac. And we can see probably, I mean, the map art's not great. I wouldn't have cared about that if the boards just weren't so friggin' warped, just unacceptably warped. So you'd have to put plexi on them anyway. And that was before everybody was putting plexi on things. So speaking of John Paniski, let's talk about Lincoln's War. This is a 2013 release from Multi-Man Publishing. This is a point-to-point game with cards. I don't know. This map makes it look like it's hexagons. That's 100% hexagons. It's just kind of laid out in such a way as to make you think it is if you're not looking at the actual map. I'm not sure you can see the hex grid on this, folks, because I can barely see it. Who's the artist? I wonder who the artist could be. I bet I know who the map artist was. So anyway, there are cards, and I believe that this looks to me like a kind of action point card-driven game. And, you know, hey, here's a card for Samuel Curtis, and there's some other ones here. This is a game that I have heard good things about. And hilariously, I think the hexagons are actually a little easier to see on this random map over this dude's shoulder than they are in the actual image, which is kind of crazy. This game has a pretty good reputation. What's it rated as? 6.3? It's not that good. But this is another one where I'd say, hey, I trust John Paniski to have something interesting to say in a game on whatever topic he happens to be designing on. And this is probably worth a whirl, if you ask me. All right, so Just a Guard. Are we talking about Lincoln's work? Because there's also this game, and I have mixed the two up before as well. I don't know if you're doing it or not, but I definitely have. This is a Martin Wallace design, and this is a little bit infamous for having an exploit. The Manassas Hammer might be the exploit. And the designer kind of waved his hand and said, well, don't play with people who will do that, which I'm not absolutely crazy about. So it sounds like Lincoln's War may have had some issues too, but I've heard better things about this. What I just described about Lincoln, this game, I think to me, that's a turnoff. I designed a game that's busted. If you don't like it, play something else. I mean, all right, well, fine. I'll take you at your word for that. But I probably think you're probably a sloppy designer and don't really want to investigate your games if that's the case. So, John Paniski's, I need to get John Paniski in for an interview. That's what I need to do because I want to ask him, where is Black Eagles? I've been seeing advertisements for it for years. So, all right. So Slagonix also says there's issues with it. Even though it's MMP and that's not something that's typical for MMP. But then again, MMP publishes a lot of series games and the series rules themselves are super polished. So I've got a couple of Paniski designs. So, all right, Charles Latoro, thanks for stopping by. All right, so maybe Lincoln's War... this is more of Artie got turned off by what the designer said in response to some particular query, and Lincoln's War appears to have its own set of issues. So there's that. 6.9. I guess that's not terrible. 6.3. This is probably a case where I might question. Is it that one of these two designers is much better known than the others? I don't know. Maybe. So, well, I mean, this is true, but they were. So, even in War Between the States, I think there might only be like 6 or 8 hexes between DC and Richmond, something like that. This could be the case. Yeah. I haven't played A Few Acres of Snow either. And this is why, because I didn't like that answer. So, All right. This game looks really nice. I can tell you that. If he includes units that weren't in the battle as like optional units, no problem. If he includes units in the battle that weren't in the battle, then that is an issue. Um, all right. So moving on from both of these, we have a House Divided. This is a Frank Chadwick design from back in the day of Game Designers Workshop. Pictured here is going to. There's been many versions of this. If we run it all the way back to this guy right here, this is the old GDW version, and this may have been in a small box. I'm not sure, but I'm also pretty sure that GDW did it in a larger box as well. And yeah, in fact, that's this. That's this one right here. You can, at some point, I'll have more to say about the graphic design skills in-house at GDW and how they were sometimes really, really strong and other times not so much. This cover has just a lot of text boxes on it. It's not a terrible cover despite that. Oh, interesting. I've played this actually. I did a video on this. This is actually it's not really my thing, but I thought it did what it was designed to do in an efficient way in the time that it said it would take to play. I consider this a quite successful design, to be completely honest, and hadn't necessarily realized it was a similar mechanics from that. Now, House Divided is point to point, and this is one of the later versions. I don't know what. I don't know whose version this is. But there's been a ton of different versions of this. So I'm seeing this 4th edition as the last version of it. But there's a 3rd edition from 2001, and I think this is the one from Phalanx. In a big flat box, similar to Age of Napoleon, if you've seen that. All right, so Slagonix says that the issues with Lincoln's War have largely been fixed. So at least now you can download, oops, we're screwing this up, download an updated rule set and get a game that works. Unlike a designer that says, well, just don't play that game. Like, okay, no problem. So I've just never liked the look of this Mayfair box, to be completely honest. Now, this is being redone by GMT, and it is coming out probably, I think there's a pretty good shot that it'll be out in 2026. The developer, by the way, is our very own friend of the channel, Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp, and I actually have only played this with Carl. I think it's a neat game. My big concern about it is playtime based on like the kind of game and the level of abstraction that it's giving you. And to me, looks like this fella's playing it in the filing cabinet at work. That's wargaming industry right there for you, folks. Fantastic. Obviously, he's not using his real name on BGG. But it's a point-to-point game, and it's actually really a pretty neat game. Really, my only problem with it is just the amount of time it takes to play. All right, so Darren Loveloff is here. Darren, thanks for stopping by. There is an Alan Emmerich edition as well. Which one is that? That's interesting. I'm not sure which one we would be talking about in that case. Alan was involved in here somewhere. I'm just not sure in which particular version. What I said was interesting was that this is the Spanish edition. It was published by Diseños Orbitales in 1992. And a nation divided is what that means in Spanish, folks. And the only reason this is interesting to me is because Diseños Orbitales, a Spanish publisher, also published the Spanish edition of Traveler, which I have and which is beautiful. So yes, I agree with that. I understand this, Brant, but still, it's the same guys doing. It's probably not the same guys. That's probably the issue. But it's the same publisher, at least, doing better graphic design, not art, graphic design in 1977 than they were doing in 1981. So, and I'm not sure what the personnel question was there. So, all right.
House Divided. I think that's, like I said, I think this is a very strong game. I'm very interested in seeing what GMT does with it. I mean, I have already seen what GDW did with it, folks, and it's great. But hopefully, GMT and I, not hopefully, but GMT should bring this back up to modern presentational standards, and I think that'll be a great thing. So. All right, and as Stacking Lit reminds us, it is time to hit the thumbs up, folks. The next game up, we'll do actually Eric Lee Smith's Civil War first. This is 1983 from Victory Games, designed by Eric Lee Smith. This is a seminal game on the American Civil War, and as the chat has already mentioned, it's really the only game that most of us can think of that covers what we call the Far West theater in the context of this game, which is basically everything that's not on this main map right here. And there's battles with the Native Americans and some other interesting things going on out there. When I have never played with the Far West expansion, it is optional. You still need the map because it's got a bunch of the displays that you do need on it, but you could fold it in half and make that work. So I don't really feel like having the Far West in here. It's nice that it's there. I don't think it's personally much of a selling point for me. Now, that said, I completely sympathize with the folks who feel like this is the greatest strategic level Civil War game of all time. I think it is easily one of the contenders for that. There are things about it that I don't like. I think it is unnecessarily fussy where it doesn't need to be. And that is a thing that will be resolved in the next game we talk about. There's also some undesirable things that it has that affect the player dynamic, and here's what I mean by that. As we've mentioned, this game has a completely dynamic leader system. You have to make rolls to see if leaders survive. You have to make rolls to see if they get promoted. So a lot of different things can happen. And from like a sandbox American Civil War type perspective, that's actually really cool. However, what you can have is something like I had happen in my game of this, which is on the channel, by the way. So go check the videos out for that. Grant comes in, first turn, gets killed. Later on, Robert E. Lee. Now, a lot. What I mean by affecting the player dynamic is a lot of Union players will just say, "Well, fuck it, it's turn 2 and Grant's dead. I can't win this." They are wrong when they say that, but that is, it's not crazy to feel like that in the moment, right? So if that happens to you, keep playing, because what happened in our game is that eventually Robert E. Lee got himself killed too. Also, Nathaniel Lyon didn't die at P Ridge or Wilson's Creek, P Ridge or P Ridge. And so he and Sherman became the two great Union Civil War generals, where on the Confederate side, Stonewall Jackson and Longstreet became the two big Confederate generals. And the game actually worked. The Union did lose, but the game actually worked out. This does take it's one of the things that causes this game to take more time to play than U.S. Civil War does. If you have players who know what they're doing in U.S. Civil War, you can easily play that in a day. This is more like a 20-hour game. Nevertheless, it really is a seminal game. It's a major influence on any strategic level Civil War game that has come out since then. Wilson's Creek, there you go. Sorry. Thank you for the correction. The naval rules are pretty weird. There's been a couple of fan-created new versions of the rules floating around. Lincoln's War. The one I said, Frank, thanks for stopping by. The one I said I think takes too long to play is not Lincoln's War. It is A House Divided, and it just takes too long. I'm not sure it's more complicated than that. Lincoln's War I have never actually played. I mean, to be fair, both this game and U.S. Civil War, which is the next game we're going to talk about, struggle with the naval rules, right? It took a couple of passes for Mark's, at least one extra pass at the rules for Mark Simonich to nail down exactly how the U.S. Civil War naval rules were actually supposed to work. But in the case of U.S. Civil War, there is a set of basic naval rules, which I think, to be honest, are going to be fine. They're fine for most people. If you want the detailed naval stuff, you can play with that, and that was kind of a not clearly explained, let's put it that way. If you have a more recent printing of U.S. Civil War, then that is, I think, desirable, and if not, go download the new rules. But this is Eric Lee Smith's Civil War is a fantastic game. This deserves to be in print, and it's unfortunate that it still isn't. But my current understanding is that Eric Lee Smith will be bringing it back to us through Revolution Games, which, whoever Eric wants to bring it back, I'm pretty cool with. All right, so the Cairo Academy for underperforming Union generals. That is kind of an issue with this game. So what ends up happening is you end up with a bunch of bums, which is historical. But then you end up assigning, because you can't really get rid of them, so you end up assigning them to Cairo or Columbus or someplace like that. Where they aren't going to screw you up. So there is another drag on the time it takes to play the game is general shuffling that you have to do because you've got crappy generals in charge where you want better generals in charge. And I think both of our last two games solve this problem, but fairly differently. This is true. Yeah, there's an unnamed general's rule for that, and it might be a way around this. I haven't played with that option, so I can't really speak to it. Right, exactly. As Mike Reed points out, he says there's no easy way to truly reflect the leader system as we've got hindsight. You want the names, meaning that, your Grants and your Shermans and your Lees and your Stonewall Jacksons and them. So you've either got to go with the U.S. Civil War programmed appearance, or you have what the Civil War did, which is create, okay, so Beauregard was in this battle. I will make a check at the end of the battle to see if he gets himself killed or not, right? And or gets himself promoted or not. So the system is dynamic, and I think it does lead to some interesting outcomes, and I like it, but I do think that it adds a significant amount of overhead, not necessarily entirely with rules, but also with the Cairo shuffle that we've already mentioned. That's true, but I wasn't that impressed with Albert Sidney Johnston. As Slagonix points out, one of the nice things about the Victory Games Civil War is you can still get it quite inexpensively. I have bought 2 copies of this in the last, 8 years or so, and I stupidly got rid of the first one because, Compass is bringing it back. I'll just buy that. That's not happening. So I ended up buying it again, and I still have it, and I'm not going to get rid of it. So I think I paid about $40 for the first copy, and it was unpunched and in very nice condition. The box was decent and all that. And then for the second copy, I have an even nicer copy that's also unpunched, and it was like $35. So you can get these things very inexpensively, and do not pay $100 for the Victory Games Civil War, folks. Instead, buy one for $20. And send Eric Lee Smith the $80. That's a better idea. All right. Yes, this is true. As Carl, thanks for stopping by. He says shuffling of generals to backorder commands did happen, as in the case of Pope and Beauregard. In the case of Pope, it was deserved. In the case of Beauregard, it probably wasn't. But it doesn't take into account the political pull that many of them had. And that is true. And that is something that our last game for the Papal does take into account. This is a considerably tighter game in a lot of ways than the Erkley Smith Civil War, and we'll get to that. So let's move on to Mark Simonich's U.S. Civil War, published in 2015 by GMT, and this is a terrific game. I bought this when it first came out. That does mean that I needed an update kit at some point to give me the new naval rules and the new updated rule book and player aids and all that jazz. There are two issues with this game, and one, if you assuming you have the updated naval stuff and have the clear rule book, so you're like playing out of a recent printing. There's two issues that I see with this game, one of which is a preference issue and one of which is a perception issue. I have on countless occasions had people tell me that this is the same game as the Eric Lee Smith victory game Civil War. It is not the same game. It has a lot of the same ideas as Eric Lee Smith's Civil War, and all that is acknowledged in Mark Simonich's designer's notes, but it also borrows just as much from For the People. So even though, but it looks more similar to the victory game Civil War because it's on a hex map that covers the entire area and not on a point-to-point map like For the People. It's very much its own thing. So, and I have tried to poo-poo that perception on many occasions. The other issue, the perception or the taste issue, if you will, that U.S. Civil War has is that unlike the Eric Lee Smith Civil War, it uses a leader's schedule. Leaders come out on a schedule, they die or are promoted on a schedule, and it's all on the turn record track. And while I do think, and I've said on many occasions, that it would be kind of nice to have a dynamic leader system for this game as an optional rule, I would probably play it most of the time on the schedule because it makes the game flow better. And that is why that decision got made. Again, this is all addressed in Simonich's designer's notes for this. I think this is a marvelous game. Mark did the map as well and the counters. So it's a top to bottom Mark Simonich package, and it's terrific. And again, I've seen this played like every convention I go to, somebody's got this on the table. And sometimes I see 4 copies of this on tables at various points. So, well, you got to start somewhere. Everybody starts out as a McClellan and wants to graduate to being a Sherman. So, and I agree with this. But here's the thing. The Confederate player needs to do this too. Just not as much. It's not like there are no bozos. Although, I mean, I can quibble with things like leader ratings and stuff like that and say, oh, that's ridiculous. But I'm not sure I want to. I think U.S. Civil War in general handles this better than the Eric Lee Smith Civil War. At least it's cleaner. I can see why some people prefer the dynamic leader system. I get that. I would like to have it as an option, but we've never had that option. And I'm a little surprised that no players have gone on their own or have not gone out on their own and made an optional leader set of rules for this. If that exists, I haven't seen it. Just a Guard says the only other way he could think to do it would be to have leaders improve or degrade based on combat results. He didn't have advanced knowledge. This actually, I think, is the case in at least one of the 3 different leader systems that are present in War Between the States. Okay, so Jeff Beeler said he had a buddy who added a house rule so you could send generals up to theater command and the U.S. gets a chief of staff slot. The trouble with that is that theater command, I mean, Grant was the theater commander, right? I know he was the overall commander, but he's the theater commander also, and he's basically sitting in George Meade's lap for most of the last 3 years of the war. So 2 years anyway. So I don't know if I think that makes a ton of sense, but I could think about it some more too. As Perfidious Albion mentions, Victory Game Civil War does rely on actual leaders, which is true. But, the leaders are one of the colorful things about the Civil War, and it's one of the things that make people want to play Civil War games. So just putting generic leaders in there, I mean, okay, but I think that would make such a game less attractive to me. This is true. This is before he had his nervous breakdown, though. So, All right. Slagonic says Victory Game Civil War also has his favorite on-map tracking charts of any game ever. Yeah, that's true. It is. It does take up a whole half map's worth of space, to be fair, but I do think these are well designed. And unfortunately, that's a lesson that wasn't learned by the folks who did On to Paris for Compass. And I don't know whose fault that was. It may or may not be the designer's fault. It may or may not be Compass's fault, but the tracks, it's based on the Victory Game Civil War system. The tracks on that are much less efficiently laid out. All right, folks, here is our bozo from Twitch who's getting us shut down on Twitch after exactly 1 hour. Goodbye, Twitch. We are sorry. What you should do is send this person a bunch of messages with pictures of your ass. And there we go. All right, we're not on Twitch anymore. So, let's see. William Aarons asked, does all these games have the Appalachian Mountains as a barrier and the railroads as a movement multiplier? Well, the point-to-point ones tend not to, but the hexagon ones tend to. Do the best of these games also take into account the naval actions on rivers and coastlines? Well, yes. I would say that the best for on hex maps, for me, I think the best Civil War games are For the People, U.S. Civil War, Victory Games Civil War, and War Between the States. For me, those are my kind of big four here, just limiting it to hexagons, because I think, well, For the People doesn't have hexagons, does it? So maybe I'm cheating. So let's leave. Those are probably my big four, regardless of whether they have hexagons or not. All of those take into account naval actions on rivers and coastlines. In at least a couple of cases in Victory Game Civil War and in War Between the States, you have to count movement by hex sides, which is frankly a pain in the ass. But the alternative is to have rivers running through the middles of hexes, which I'm on record as not liking. I think Justigard mentioned earlier that the original Mr. Lincoln's War hexes had the rivers going through the middles, like it did in the original version of War and Peace, or the Avalon Hill edition, I should say, because they're all like that. But also, like the new One Small Step editions of War and Peace, they are moving the rivers to the hex sides instead. I did consider having to count hex side movement to be a pain in the rear, to be completely honest about it. All right. Michael Pratt mentions you can add more leaders. Are we talking about the Victory Game Civil War? Because I know that these exist. For U.S. Civil War, I don't know that I've seen that. Yeah, I remember this video. And then I talked to some people who were playing On to Paris, like at the convention I went to a couple of weeks later, and they said, yep, these suck. So, all right. I'm slightly behind on the chat. So what we're going to do I want to talk about For the People first before we move on. So I've told this story many times before, so I'll keep this short. So I was not into Civil War games. I had owned a couple of Civil War games. I had played a couple of even fewer Civil War games. I had, for example, the old Avalon Hill versions of the first couple Great Campaigns of the American Civil War series, and I didn't play any of them at the time. But I just kind of wasn't that interested in Civil War. And then, at Cabs, one of the people I was doing war games with said, "Hey, you picked up U.S. Civil War. Let's play that this Saturday or so, whatever day it was." And so we played it, and I was immediately hooked. So that's why I blame Mark Herman for all the Civil War games that I have right now. This is the game that made me a big fan of the Civil War as a topic for war games. It is a point-to-point card-driven game on the traditional card-driven game model, where the cards have both events and action points, and you can spend the action points to do various things. It is fairly complicated in terms of those kinds of games, but I don't know that I think it's more complicated than, say, Paths of Glory. It does have some slightly noodly movement rules in one particular place on the map, which I'm trying to pull up, but it's up here. I'm not getting it in here. There's like a restricted river crossing up here around Cairo, Kentucky somewhere. And I forget exactly how that worked. So this is just a terrific game. This is the older map, by the way. I don't know if we have a picture of the new map. This is the new current box from GMT. I ordered the box because it's a 3-inch box instead of a 2-inch box, which means you can actually like fit the game in it. This might be the new one. This is the new one. This is Terry Leeds' work. I don't know who did the original without looking. But yeah, it's a really gorgeous map. And the new one is even nicer looking, and every wargamer should play this at least once. You aren't required to like it, but you should play it at least once. It's a terrific game. All right, we're going to get caught up on the chat here, folks, while we hear from our good friends at Noble Knight Games. So take it away, Noble Knight. We'll be back in just 30 seconds.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more, going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at, complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, we're now almost 10 minutes behind on the chat, folks, so I'm just going to go through this and we'll get to stuff that we get to. So let's see here. I do think this is a distinct possibility. Stonewall says that Gettysburg would have been the same or worse had Stonewall Jackson survived. And I think that is a distinct possibility. We credit Jackson with a lot, and when he was good, he was really good, but he wasn't good all the time. There were plenty of times, and part of it is because he was fucking nuts and drove himself like days with no sleep and then passed out on the battlefield, like took a snooze while the battle was raging around him. So, and that is the end of the mixtures, folks. It is good. All right. Jackson might have had a tighter leash on Heath. That's true. You might not have had a Gettysburg if that's the case. Okay, Stonewall points out that Heath would have been under Hill's command. Yeah, and this is true too. I do think the army would have gotten reorganized into a 3-corps army, regardless of whether Stonewall Jackson got himself shot in the back by his own men or not. So, I think genius is fair, to be completely honest. But like many geniuses, he was super duper erratic and kind of nuts. So, that helped him in places, and it also hurt him in places. That's actually not quite. I think that you do have military departments in War Between the States, I think. At least I vaguely recall that. Yeah, like we've said, I think Jackson, I'm behind on the chat here, folks. Sorry. I think Lee does create a 3rd corps, or somebody in the Confederate chain of command creates a 3rd corps just because of the necessity to command an army that large. So, this is true too. You know who was pretty good at First Bull Run was PGT Beauregard, and he got sent off to do nothing. So, interesting. Slagonix is still waiting for the definitive American Civil War political simulation. The PC game No Greater Glory from C.S.A. is the only game he's seen that addresses this. I can't think of any either. I'm not sure I knew about this, to be completely honest. We're still catching up here, folks. Ron Nicholson points out that 19% of Confederate generals were killed or died of wounds, while roughly 8% of Union generals were killed. There were more Union generals, though. So, all right. Drew says that No Greater Glory was crap as a battle game, but one reviewer said he could smell the whiskey and cigars, which sounds awesome, actually. Speaking of somebody that's got whiskey right here. There was really nothing left in that. All right, Rebel Raiders by GMT. Yeah, this is strategic. Maybe I haven't played this. Rebel Raiders on the High Seas. It's from GMT. I'm not sure I remember off the top of my head who the designer was, and I've seen this on tables a fair amount of the time. Even though it was one of those games that sat around in the warehouse at GMT for quite a while, as I recall. I'm not sure what was up with that. And of course, Joe Perez, thanks for stopping by, says that having leader ratings improve based on game performance, but it would invariably lead to players hunting opponents, historically good leaders, to keep them from improving their ratings. I agree with this too. This is kind of why I like the U.S. Civil War. It takes this entire dimension out of the game and lets you focus on the actual military operations and not this very gamey leader shuffling thing. Interesting. Sean Sullivan points out that the personality modifiers from the Lace Wars system, that's from Red Sash games, would fit American Civil War generals to model their aggression or lack thereof. I gotta actually take a look at this game system sooner or later. Yes, and this was indeed a pain in the nuts in all of the games that we did with this. Well, at this point, though, we are operating in an entirely hypothetical space. I do feel that there is some degree of inevitability to Jackson getting himself killed. So, the first person you should talk to about making sure Jackson doesn't get killed would have been Jackson himself. So, he was the kind of guy like Lon who kind of tended to get himself killed. So, which in some respects worked to his advantage as a battlefield commander. All right, so William Aarons points out that historically the Union had better leadership in the Western Theater from 1862. When Grant and Sheridan moved to the Eastern Theater in 1864, things improved there as well. Yeah, absolutely. Who's out west for the Confederates after Shiloh? So Shiloh, Albert Sidney Johnston gets himself killed. Joe Johnston does make an appearance in the Western Theater, and I think Joe Johnston was a pretty good general. Other than that, you've got people like Pillow. There's a lot of bozos in the Confederate Army too, and most of those end up out west. So then you've got guys. I mean, we could have a whole 5-hour discussion. I'm not just going to be the only person talking about this. If we had like a round table about Civil War generals amongst fellow war gamers, I think that would be fascinating, and somebody should organize that. It ain't going to be me. But like Hood, who's a really good division commander, but they make him an army. By the time he gets to be an army commander, he has no idea what he's doing. So, all right, this is totally true. I agree with this too. Oh, that's a problem. Still, I've got the original map. I don't care. Yep, and during the 7 days battles in particular, he was not good. Part of that is because he had marched him and his men all the way from the Shenandoah Valley, though. So, I tell you what, let's wrap our. I'm going to get caught up on the chat and wrap the Civil War conversation up, and then I might talk about this, even though I've already done a video on this. All right, so John C. says that Shelby Foote said that the Civil War produced two true geniuses, Abraham Lincoln and Nathan Bedford Forrest. That is something that somebody said. This is actually absolutely true. Jackson was intimately familiar with the Valley. That's one of the reasons why he was so good. He also had better maps than the Union had at the time. So Mike Reed is clipping counters. Awesome from Inflection Point. And I agree with this too. But the dynamic in Lee's tent at the top level might have been different too had Jackson been there. So who knows? I am very happy that through some mischievous alchemy, we have almost no dickheads that ever show up here. Not never, but it's not that it doesn't happen very often, and almost never do we have to actually come down on anybody. Here's the rule, folks. We're all friends here. Don't be an asshole to people. That's it. All right. So the Fighting Bishop, Leonidas Polk, another classic Confederate terrible general, including Braxton Bragg, who's my favorite Confederate punching bag general, to be completely honest. Well, it is a factor that everybody, including his superiors, his inferiors, and his men, all fucking hated him. I mean, what's he got going for him as a general? He certainly didn't win many battles, so I don't know. Although I can take McClellan and say, hey, McClellan beat Robert E. Lee in the 7 days campaign, the Peninsula campaign. I can't say Bragg ever beat anybody noteworthy. So, oh, this is true. Actually, they did get railed. That must have been somewhere else. There's a whole bunch of things. I don't want to really get into that because I could, again, talk for another 45 minutes and then it's just me preaching at everybody, and I don't feel like doing that. So, Gideon Pillow, a real winner. George Thomas is one of my favorite Confederates, because he's from Virginia, but he did not betray his country and fought for the Union admirably. The Rock of Chickamauga himself. Big fan of George Thomas. All right, folks. So we're wrapping up the Civil War topic at this point. And I guess I'm going to talk about I might do another screen share here. So I'll have to, this thing's on backer kit. Yeah. I've already done a live stream about this, but there is a Kickstarter backer kit crowdfund out there right now for something called Traveler 5e. And what this is it has nothing to do with the 5th edition of Traveler that was designed by Mark Miller and published through his own Far Future Enterprises. This is an adaptation of Traveler to some extent. We're not entirely clear. And into the D&D 5e system. This is, I admit that I am curious, and as a Traveler collector, I would want to buy this, but the prices of their crowdfunding tiers are really, really high, and there's a bunch of red flags here too, including these little randomized loot packs that sound an awful lot like loot crates to me. The fact that their funding goal was less than $2,000. They're not going to print 4 hardcovers in a metal slipcase for $2,000. There's a lot of stuff here, and we are told almost nothing about the way this thing is going to be implemented. I have many concerns and have elected at this time to not back it. I will, if it actually releases, I will investigate it when it comes out, and not until then. I will investigate it when it comes out and think about purchasing it digitally. As it is, the Kickstarter, it's not a Kickstarter, it's on BackerKit. The crowdfunding campaign has priced me out of the market for this. So that is my opinion on that. There's a whole bunch of ding-dongs and gizmos and stuff like that, and it would have been cool to have, and 3D printable miniatures and loot packs, and then bigger crates of loot packs and a bunch of fancy dice and all this stuff. I don't feel like I need any of this stuff. If you really want to see me walk through this entire crowdfunding campaign, I did a live stream last Tuesday on this topic, so check that out. It's only like half an hour, and there's some Q&A at the end, and I'd say so when it goes off, so you could skip all the boring parts if you want. So Staglib is pointing out that you should really like the video if you haven't given me a thumbs up already. It is much appreciated. All right. Oh, Kirby Smith. Yeah, there's that. All right. All right. So I don't have like an ideological beef with this Traveler 5e thing, right? I've got this shelf up here that you can't see is all my non-Traveler stuff. So we have the GURPS Traveler, the D20 Traveler, and the Traveler, the New Era. And if I were to obtain this product, that's where it would go. As a Traveler collector, I'd kind of like to have it for the collection, especially with the fancy metal slipcase, because I don't have that. As a Traveler referee, I see no use for this product at all. It is not at all clear whether this will be set in the official Traveler universe, someplace in the Traveler universe, but it's kind of its own space as a reservation for this project, or whether it's going to be in its own unique universe or not. Some of the art, which there's very little of, that they show does show Aslan and Vargar, so maybe it's set in the OTU. I have no idea. They're not telling us. So, and maybe they've said these things somewhere on social media, but I'm not on every single social media platform, and I'm not going to be. If you want me to give you my money, this is where that information should be living. Kirby Pocket, that's a totally different Kirby. So, yeah, I mean, like I said, there's big red flags here, folks. The low cost, like the fact that everything looks kind of generic. We're kind of reusing the same couple of pieces of what might be concept art over and over again. I don't know that that's what's happening, but there's all kind of red flags here, and the loot crates in particular are a giant Red Army over the Reichstag sized red flag for this to me. I'm not. It's not Traveler anyway. So I mean, I'll say that, but that's the extent of my ideological bias here. If I think that it is going to bring in like a bunch of 5th edition D&D players, then okay, I guess that's nice. Maybe some of them will graduate to the actual game that they have just purchased. But if they don't, and if they don't, that's fine too. But I'm not sure I see the point. I don't know. We'll see. I don't think I know enough about what this is even going to be yet, to be honest. And to be fair, world's largest RPG, which are the people doing this, have been candid about this. They said they want to bring Traveler to a whole new audience. Well, okay, but what do we mean? Right? Do we just mean another fucking space D&D? Because if we do, you're not going to get a nickel from me. I don't need another space D&D. There's already like 8 of them out there already. D&D in space, great. There's 15 other versions of that. Or I could play an actual science fiction game that was designed to like run science fiction stuff. As a player, I would try this. If somebody said, "Hey, I'm going to run Traveler 5e," I'd be, yeah, why not? We'll give it a shot. We'll see what happens. I am interested in the implementation of the Traveler concepts that they have addressed in this crowdfunding statement. So we're going to wait and see at this point. Like I said, I'm not like super convinced that this is a real product at this point, given what looks like a lot of placeholder art. There's only 2 artists credited here, and they're talking about 4 huge hardcover books with dozens to hundreds of illustrations for starships and alien animals and all this other stuff. So anyway, and I see the marketing incentive for this. I think it's understandable. If they're going to do this, then okay. Now they did say, "Oh, we did that as a tribute to the original game's release." Bullshit. They did that so that they could then post out on all of their post-launch promotional material funded in 2 minutes. Because with the cost of what this thing costs to buy into, that's like literally 4 people had to back this thing to hit their funding goal. I don't know, man. I just think it sounds super fishy. It's super fishy looking. Anyway. M5 says backer kit in general confuses him. Ordered Armageddon War and expansions as part of Rising Dragon's backer kit without ordering Rising Dragon, I hope. I don't know. I do find the interface for Kickstarter to be a little more straightforward, but I might be I've used it more. I've done a couple of things on backer kit, but not that much. So the short version of that particular thing is that I remain as invested in Traveler as ever. I'm just not investing in this. Is it Traveler? I think that's a semantic argument that I think has no particular real value. So there's been a lot of also marketing confusion over this. A lot of people seem to think that this is Mongoose, and they see it and it looks sketchy. So, fuck Mongoose. And like Mongoose is like, what the fuck? We had nothing to do with this. All we did was say, yeah, go ahead and do that and pay us a certain, for whatever the percentage is. Mongoose is the owner of the IP of Traveler. They are licensing it to the world's largest RPG people. So, I Bill, I mean, there's a degree to which I cannot deny that what you have just said is absolutely correct. At the same time, I think that is the natural pool of new players to pull people from into other RPGs. And if you can do that, great. And some games do, and some players eventually might. I have a whole can of Diet Mountain Dew here that I haven't touched. It's been opened, and that's it. Probably because I didn't want to drink this at the same time I was drinking the whiskey, because that sucks. So, but if D&D has a this huge population of players, hey, what if we can get 1% of that number to buy our thing? That's going to look like a huge smash hit. Now, as of right now, the Traveler 5e crowdfunding campaign is almost at $500,000. And they've included a number of neat stretch goals like VTT support, a character sheet, special edition, which is even more expensive, upgrade ribbons, blank subsector map notebook add-on. Okay. Content expansion. That's for their new Prime X or whatever it is setting, which I like I said, they're not really being clear about what that is. Oh, an additional dice set option in the mystery bag. Civ X, that's the name of their setting or setting pocket, whatever it is. There's a hex map that's included. Wow. There's a special edition upgrade page gilding. There's more VTT stuff. Man, just putting all this stuff in stretch goals is again another red flag with this. Now, as I mentioned in the other video, Mark's on board with this, and Matt from Mongoose is on board with this, and they got Tim Brown to lead the project. That is the only thing really that makes me feel any good about this, to be completely honest. So Spelljammer but it's not, because it's still got orcs and kobolds and that stuff. Now they're actually back in the day in Dragon magazine, they had dwarves for travelers. There was an article in Dragon about that, and I'm sure that other things like that appeared. If you want those things in your game, that's fine too. I'm not trying to beef on 5e or D&D particularly. For me, this has no practical use, and I question whether it is viable as a product idea or not. I hope that it is. And I hope that the product comes out, and I hope it's good. So, okay. So, Molotov Cocktail says his question is, would those D&D 5e people want something like 5e when looking for something else, or want something new? I would think they'd want to switch it up if they were open to trying. Yeah, I would think so. But, I guess if we're talking about So I think there's two kinds of people who play D&D. One of those types are people who play Dungeons and Dragons. And to some extent, this is true of other role-playing games too, but by and large, it is D&D that this is true for. There are people who play at D&D, and then there were gamers who play D&D. Those gamers will absolutely branch out into other things. The people who don't play D&D, don't engage with the hobby on any level. There's nothing wrong with this, folks. I need to make that explicit. I am not dragging those people. But the people who aren't interested in getting deeper into the hobby might well want like a fresh setting and set of tropes, but they don't really want to learn a new system. And if this thing brings them into Traveler, oh, okay, cool. Maybe 1% of them will eventually buy an actual Traveler product. That would be cool. So possibly. I actually picked up the new edition of that from Cubicle 7, I think, is doing it now. All right, so Tabletop's Edge, Doug, thanks for stopping by. He says, look, Wargamers, we're always coming up with new topics for systems we love. Yeah, but at the same time, we can be super resistant to new mechanics or new mechanical approaches. So now I have my preferences, right? But I'm, honest with myself about what those are. I like hex and counter games. But that doesn't mean I won't play anything else. I would buy an OCS Italian campaign in a minute. I'm not convinced OCS is the best game system for that. In fact, I'm reasonably sure it isn't, but I would probably still buy such a product. Ed Cowan, thanks for stopping by. Grew up in the North, went to the Citadel in the South. Love the culture and geography. His heart is Yankee, heat is Yankee, and heart is Southern. When he plays the Civil War, he always takes the North. TSS is a classic that we just didn't get to tonight. I'll eventually do a Civil War tactical / grand tactical show too, and we'll have a bunch of stuff to talk about there. I don't have any of these brass games. I have no idea what they are. I mean, I've seen them, but like people playing them, and I'm sure they're popular, but they're just not a thing. Starfinder is Pathfinder in space. In fact, if you just didn't like Spelljammer, but you kind of liked what Spelljammer was trying to do, I think Starfinder is a perfectly good option for you. Starfinder is Starfinder's not fooling anybody, right? It is space D&D. It is intended to be space D&D, and I realize that the system has drifted a little from since its second edition. The system has drifted a little bit from its D&D roots, but it's still pretty recognizable as a D&D variant, right? Roger M. Seth remembers when D&D was one pamphlet. It was never actually one pamphlet, though. It was 3 pamphlets in the original, and then there were various basic sets that did. Where's mine? The trouble is I've got this chair in here. I'm not digging it out. I've got a Moldvay basic rule book, just a rule book around here somewhere. And that's not my original, unfortunately. I shouldn't have gotten rid of that, but here we are. So I just knocked a huge stack of counters over. We're going to have to grab room in this one. I do. Excellent. I have room in the counter tray I already have over here. Yeah, and like I said, I have no particular beef with this. But I would, if I am going to run, or well, let me put it a different way. Because like I said, I would play this if somebody offered to run it. Somebody who I thought was not a bozo and could run it. I would have no particular problem with that. I do not mean signing up for a lengthy campaign. I'm talking about like a one shot. No problem. I'll give it a shot. So if people really like the D&D mechanics, then yeah, by all means, use it for whatever you want to use it for. I mean, it is after all your game. But what I would like people to realize is that the game that we bought is, once we buy it, this is true of Wargames, true of RPGs, true of whatever. Once we've bought it, it's ours now. We can do what we want with it. I have the toolkit to do what I want for science fiction gaming, and don't need a D&D derived inferior tool set to do that. People who are really invested in the D&D ecosystem, more power to them. That's great. Keep playing what you want to play. All right. My Henry Mike says he cut his teeth on Holmes Basic. I've owned Holmes, but I've never actually played it or tried to play it. It was a really successful implementation for what it was supposed to do, which is to actually explain how to play Dungeons and Dragons, which the original books did not really do. Well, yes, but the people who just play D&D and they're playing it with their friends, and that's why they're there, right? It's not, they're not beloved of D&D. They think of whatever they're doing as D&D. Those people are not looking for new RPGs. They're happy with D&D. And if that's the case, I mean, fine, cool. I'm happy with Traveler. I don't need D&D. I'm good. Although there is a possibility that I will be running D&D for nieces and nephews, and if that happens, I will let you know. But that is a possibility that has been floated in recent days or weeks, and I would 100% do it to run D&D for kids. Fuck, that would be amazingly fun. Anyway, I would not use that language for the youngsters. Ed Holtzman had a crush on Jeff D's Morgan Ironwolf. Yes, I'm not sure if I would describe it as a crush. Jeff Beelis says Ty Frank, co-author of The Expanse, really praises D20 Modern as a game system, and that is based on D&D 3.5. If I were going to run a D&D campaign, and this would be a like full arty effort D&D campaign where I create a world and all that jazz, I would probably use D&D 3.5. I might not run such a game ever, but there we are. Well, yeah, I mean, remember that this thing is pitched at D&D 5e players, and in that context, it's a big audience. I hope they're successful, and right now the numbers look good, but I have reason to think that the numbers are kind of set up in such a way as to make them look good. Different homes. And of course, I mean, you always have. I have observed this too. I mean, where it's sometimes tough trying to talk wargamers into playing the thing that you want to play because they're just like not vibing it. And you have the same effect happens in RPGs too. It took me years to get the same group that we've been playing a variety of different things, not just D&D, but including D&D. We played with that group before we played Ars Magica. We had probably D&D. We did, I think, Tribe 8 from DreamPod 9. We had several other things, none of which were remotely related to D&D until I finally managed to talk them after like 2 years of badgering into Ars Magica, and they loved it once we did it. And then that became our like main game run by either me or somebody else, or me and somebody else, or a variety of other people who did it. We had a fabulous time with it, and a new edition of that should be coming along soonish as well. All right. I mean, you might well be right about this, but they're already getting 500,000 so far. So again, if you just divide, I'm going to actually do this right now. Currently, the Kickstarter is running at 489,204, and there are 1,359 backers. So the average backers buy-in is $359, almost $360. It's $359 and change. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot. Now, if we had like cut all these prices in half, I might be back. Problem or not, I'll figure out I'll fucking sell something and get the money. I'd probably be back in it. But because it's, or if no, their money was just simply not a concern, I would probably back it just to have it, and then I would say, "Gee shucks," if they never actually shipped the game. So, I mean, I agree with you, Bill, on this, but not all those folks do. So. All right, so after Holmes Basic D&D, Manry Mike moved to Empire of the Petal Throne, which is a classic 1975 release from C.S.A, designed by M.A.R. Barker, who later turned out to be an actual card-carrying Nazi. Now, I'm not talking about, I don't like him, so I'm calling, no, he was the actual Nazi. He was actually affiliated with the neo-Nazis and wrote a neo-Nazi novel and stuff like that. It was bad news all around. Very disappointed. I have not dumped any of my substantial collection of that product line because it really is a remarkable world, and I don't mind since he's dead. I don't mind encouraging people to check it out. Jonathan Dyer's Wednesday group's go-to rule set is now Shadow Dark for the simplicity. I picked up Shadow Dark at Origins, and the first thing I said about it was, after starting to leaf through it, I'm like, oh, I don't know, it's just D&D. But then if you like look at, and I haven't played it, haven't run it, haven't done anything like that, so bear that in mind when I say this. It also just occurred to me that I didn't turn the friggin' lights on, so I'm getting massive reflections off my glasses. That actually somehow makes it better, even though there's more light in the room now. Looking at Shadow Dark more closely, I think the really remarkable thing is the concision of its presentation, which is not new or unique to Shadow Dark necessarily, but it kind of boils down 5th edition D&D rules into this really lean package, and I can 100% see why people would favor that. Jeff Bueller points out that Artemis 2 is now on its way home from the moon, which is great. Yeah, I would play War Between. I mean, there's a reason I have 2 copies of it now. They're not the same copy. I've got an SPI copy and a Decision copy. And I would probably play with the Decision copy because even though they're both punched and organized and ready to go, because the map's nicer. Do role-playing games have legendary monsters? Like, this is a really interesting question, actually. So the dynamic is very different, right? What a wargamer might consider a monster game that's maybe bigger than they really want to deal with is kind of the normal operating mode of a role-playing game where you're getting together on some kind of regular basis and you're continuing to play the same game. So, super interesting questions. Now, there are legendary campaigns, however, and there's a number of those that I can think of off the top of my head. There's several for D&D. Probably the best one, in my opinion, is probably the whole Queen of the Spiders arc, where you put the Giants modules and then the Drow modules and then the Queen of the Demon Web Pits, which is a giant letdown at the end. But there's probably other D&D campaigns that I think are equally iconic or legendary. That would include Dragonlance. That might include Desert of Desolation. I've never thought much of the Slave Lords modules personally, so that's out the window. There's the original Ravenloft, but that's not it could be a whole campaign, to be honest, out of that one module. You could do that. Staculum is playing Draw Steel, which that's actually, it's an interesting looking game system. And Matt Colville is an old acquaintance from the RPG Net days, so I have a soft spot for Matt. But after hearing about, I watched several videos, both from Matt and from other people talking about it after its release, and have concluded that it is not for me. And that's not because it's fantasy; it's because there are several design decisions in it that are just simply not to my taste. I don't have it in PDF. I have it in physical. There's no barcode on this thing. I don't remember what I paid for it. I think it was about $50. Here's the book. It's a little digest-sized book. It's really well done. It's really well executed. This is an example, like all the stuff you need for this particular topic is on this page. You need to know how long torches last. Here it is on this page, which is actually an interesting mechanic that Shadow Dark does. So I do think it's World's Largest Dungeon is big. Admittedly, I haven't looked at it in decades. So maybe it's better than I remember, but I don't remember it being very good. There are plenty of legendary non-D&D campaigns. These include the Great Pendragon campaign for Pendragon, which is legendary and hideously expensive on the secondary market. But you can get it in digital or I think print on demand from Drive-Thru RPG. There is Pirates of Drenax for Traveler. I think that's the best of the Traveler published campaigns by a lot, but it is a particular type of campaign. It's very sandboxy. It can easily go off the rails in a number of different ways, some of which will be highly entertaining and others of which will be impossible for the referee to manage. I think some of the other I would probably say Secret of the Ancients is probably the second best Traveler campaign. That's Secret of the Ancients, not Wrath of the Ancients or whatever the other one is, because Mongoose did it as a trilogy, and I think those aren't quite as good. I think Deep Night Revelation has a tremendous amount of potential, but is underdeveloped for what you get and what you are going to actually try to run. I think it needed an extra book or two, and it's already got like 7 books and like 6 books in a box set. There's Masks of Nyarlathotep for Call of Cthulhu, and in fact, there's a large number of really legendary monster Call of Cthulhu campaigns, including At the Mountains of Madness, which is set in Antarctica. That's awesome. There's at least a couple other ones that are really well regarded. The Enemy Within campaign for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is a classic, great campaign. Shardenzar, welcome to the show. It says GURPS is being squeezed, followed by closely by Harnmaster. So back in the day, I was a huge fan and proponent of GURPS. And again, it was one of those things that I was willing to run it and nobody wanted to play it. And the one thing that I did manage to run was GURPS Traveler, which lasted for 5 sessions or something like that. I love Harnmaster on the other hand. One of my long-term, not long-term in terms of like 20 years from now, but long-term as in the next couple of years, I would like to run a Harn campaign because I love Harn. And I like Harnmaster. I think it's a pretty good system, but I kind of like to run it in Mithras too. Danny Gable is running DCC and his players are all enjoying it. DCC is a hoot. DCC is one of the many clones of Dungeons and Dragons that I think has its own personality and things to say. Not all of them do, in my opinion. Mike Reed asks, aren't the Greyhawk or Blackmoor settings the Labatai or TSSD? Yeah, kind of. I could do a video on Greyhawk, to be completely honest. And if you want to know more about Greyhawk, go check out the Greyhawk Grognard here on YouTube. That's Joe Block. He is the designer of Adventures Dark and Deep and has a bunch of great stuff for both 5th edition players and for people who maybe don't want to play 5th edition. So Rappanathic, I didn't think much of Rappanathic either. Oh yeah, Horror on the Orient Express. Didn't I mention that's another classic Call of Cthulhu campaign? Stacking Limit mentions Dragonlance. I thought I said that, but maybe I didn't. I would put that on that list, as well as the basic, the Expert Set campaign. Master of the Desert Nomads. That series. I think that would fall into that category. Research Station Gamma is a good one, but like the early Traveler adventures are like you look at them now and you think, I'm confused. Is this an adventure? Let's see where my hexes at. Oh, Stigler's complaining. I am shocked. Squirrel Herman is also a fan of Harnmaster. Yeah, I have run Harn. I've run Harn in Rollmaster. I've run it in Harnmaster. I think it would make a really good Harn would be a really good setting for chivalry and sorcery. The original, we're getting back deep into the weeds of Dungeons and Dragons history here, folks, with Blackmoor. Blackmoor is really the first D&D campaign. Even though the Greyhawk supplement came out first, there are TSR reasons for that. Yes. Larry DiTilio, I forget how his last name is actually spelled, was the script continuity manager for the early seasons of Babylon 5. And I think it did get written. I don't know if that got written. Oh, no, I think that did get written during this screenwriter strike, actually, because that's when he got into doing gaming. And he did a number of things. Unfortunately, the late Larry DiTilio, or whatever his name was. So I do see where Jeff Beeler is coming from, that Blackmoor might be considered the Drangnok Austin of D&D. Daddy Roller 1 covers the dawn of D&D. Yeah, but you're getting, yes. I don't know what Daddy Roller 1 is actually covered, actually. So I don't know. My sources are mostly John Peterson's Playing at the World, the first one, and the Once We Were Wizards or When We Were Wizards or whatever it is podcast that I recently listened to the whole thing Burning Banners, supposed to be a good game. I keep putting it on in my shopping cart at Noble Knight, and it keeps vaporizing before I can buy it. So, Strahd and Rime of the Ice Maiden. Strahd, are we talking about Curse of Strahd? Those were popular. I feel like I appreciated the. All right, we got an autofocus issue. Harnmaster, if you look at the 3rd edition Harnmaster, that's the Columbia Games rule set, it's actually pretty straightforward once you start building characters and playing it. It's easier to play than it looks. Mike Reed may have had a question. Did we get some? Here's a counter clipping question. Do I tend to punch out all the counters first before clipping them all? No, I go in stages because I'd rather keep the counters on the sheets until I'm ready to clip them, and I got cats. So this is an example. I pulled these out, then I started working on these. I'll do them in whatever order. I will also tend to clip one nationality at a time because that way it gets organized together. So I tend not to clip the entire game. There are exceptions, but for me, the only exceptions come when we're talking about a game where I have to cut the counters out of the sprues. Then it becomes more efficient to do all that and then start clipping. The only thing that's come up like that recently was Empires of the Middle Ages from Decision, actually. These counters have center nibs, so I feel obliged to cut them out of the counter sheets. Thank you for pointing out the question. Are there any recent world... all right, I'm not sure what's going on there. Failure to route. Thanks for stopping by. Says, it has been done in the past, but are there any recent World War II RPGs anyone is playing? Somebody did one. Is War Stories that game, or is War Stories a board game? I'm not sure. But there have been a couple. Yeah, I know it's a YouTube channel. I just haven't watched that particular video or set of videos. There is GURPS World War II. There's a whole line of GURPS World War II books. SPI's Commando. It's sitting, you probably can't see it. It's sitting right down there. Yeah, you can see it, sort of, kind of. It's the blue thing down here in this corner. SPI's Commando is kind of a cross between an RPG and a tactical war game. It's an Eric Goldberg design, as I recall, and it's an interesting product. It's kind of in that period where people are still kind of figuring out what a role-playing game is. And when we started to see products that reflected that, tended to be in that period between like 1979 and like 1982. And this is one of those. Stag Limit says War Stories is an RPG. There's also Night Witches, which is just a moment. There's also Night Witches. Now, there's the war game that's coming out from David Thompson and Liz Davidson from Fort Circle called Night Witches. There's also an earlier RPG by Jason Morningstar and possibly some other people called Night Witches, and the topic is the same. It's female Soviet pilots in World War II on the East Front. And I have not played. I haven't technically not played either game, but I watched over Brant's shoulder when he was playing a game of David Thompson and Liz Davidson's Night Witches, and it's pretty neat. And Liz, on her podcast, the Beyond Solitaire podcast, actually talked to Jason Morningstar, and again, maybe somebody else, about the topic and how he approached it from an RPG standpoint. So that's not particularly new. That's at least 10 years old. Behind Enemy Lines was published by C.S.A. back in the mid-'80s, as I recall. It was one of C.S.A.'s first, if not their first, own RPGs. Okay, so apparently there's War Story and War Stories, plural, and they are two different games. And yes, that is confusing. Struggle for the Galactic Empire. I think this is a cool game, but the counters were difficult to extract from the sheets for whatever reason. Yeah. So Quinn's quest is Quinn from I think Shut Up and Sit Down or one of the other big board game channels, and he started an RPG channel. And I've watched several of his videos now, and I think that I'm not sure how I want to say this. I like his content. I think he is it seems like a neat guy. It's not a personal thing. I just feel like he doesn't have the depth of the RPG field knowledge that he has about modern board games. Omega Games Ranger, holy cow. Oh, right. Jonathan Dyer says that War Stories was the GM-less RPG designed by David Thompson and the guy who did Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. That's cool. All right. Yeah, you can co-op it too. Liz from Avalanche Games? I don't think so. I am reasonably sure the answer to this question is no. Jonathan Dyer says there's a PBTA means powered by the apocalypse, which means that it is an adaptation of the system from Vincent and I think McGay Baker in Apocalypse World, which has now been adapted to a million different settings. And I've played several of them, but certainly nothing like all of them. I would agree. Try to easily. It depends. It depends. I think it would be easier to do it in GURPS. If you really like the Twilight 2000 system, maybe you want to do it in that, but you'd have to reconfigure all the gear too. Dawn Patrol, not really a role-playing game. It's really a World War II biplane dogfighting game with a campaign mode. SPI Sniper on the table. Very good. Liz was a teacher until she got started with later games, or whoever Liz is working with now. I'm not sure it's the same people that I'm thinking. Yes. Cole Worley's doing wasn't Whirligig him though? I'm a little confused by that. But I haven't asked anybody about it either. So yeah, I am unaware of any. It's funny to mention that because I had a conversation with Liz about Avalanche Press. But as far as I know, there's no actual connection there. So, and the Liz with later games is the same Liz Davidson that does Beyond Solitaire. That I can tell you. Okay, Jeff Beeler says that Liz from Avalanche is Liz Fulda out of Chicago. Okay. But good for Liz. I think that's great. Professor Salvian would love to see an RPG on Commando raids, long range desert group, and SAS for World War II. That'd be interesting. You could. This is not something I have ever considered with any level of seriousness whatsoever. But there's no reason you couldn't have a World War II RPG. I don't know that I'd be interested in that at a campaign level. But it's like a mini thing, like a one shot or a short series. I think you could totally do this. If I were going to do that, I would probably use GURPS. I think GURPS is the natural choice for that. There's a ton of support for a whole line of World War II books that came out. It seems very logical to me to just say, we'll just use GURPS for this. I don't, there are reasons why I object to GURPS for myself to Traveler using GURPS, but there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the idea. I just have personal quibbles about some of the adaptation decisions that were made there to make the Traveler universe comport with the GURPS system and its set of design assumptions. Sergeant Rock RPG, probably a big money to get that license, but again, run down behind enemy lines. I have no idea whether that was any good or not. All right, Perigi says that Whirligig was for his historical stuff. Buried Giant is the new studio, which I've heard about this, which will produce the bigger market stuff and the world. Oh, okay. I mean, if Cole wants to do this, cool. That's cool. I really would like to play John Company, to be completely honest about it. I have been, so hopefully there will be an interview with Jacob Guernsey out tomorrow. That is going to depend on whether I get the editing done tomorrow morning or not. But it should happen. It's not like it's a difficult, it's not like it's going to be a difficult interview to edit. It won't be. So there's that. Yeah, but I mean, in the same, Neil Badke says you could call DVG leader games semi-RPG. You're running pilots, managing missions and their health and status. Yeah, but I would put this in the same category as Gamma World. If you want a true hybrid, there's not that many. There are a few. Obviously, you could, I suppose, play like a miniatures game to do your battles. There's a whole bunch of games that would be suitable for that. But there have been a few hybrids that have been both equal parts tactical war game and RPG. Commando is one of those things, I think not a particularly successful iteration of, but Falling Stars from Lock and Load, I think was a more creatively successful adaptation of that idea and better executed, but there's decades of hindsight has helped them along with that. Back in 1979, everybody was still figuring this out. So I intend to play John Company at some point. Dustin Mitchell says there's going to be at least one John Company game at SD HistCon North, which I do plan to be at as of this moment. I don't know what that means either. Finding more. Oh, I see what you mean. I was reading Mike Reed's comment. I'm like, wait, what? No, I understand. Finding more of these podcasts concerning gaming has cost me a pretty penny of late. In addition to here, the folks at Heavy Cardboard, Ed's a good guy. I've met him. Are guilty. Great to see games in their places. Yeah, I agree. And I do like Heavy Cardboard. He does Wargame stuff, but not everything. Not everything he does is Wargames. He does heavy games. Some of them are war games because war games are pretty good at being heavy games for the most part. And I'm not saying that Edward's definition of heavy game and mine are identical. They are not. His definition of heavy game is my definition of average. But that's just me and my tastes talking. Jonathan Dyer enjoyed the Frederick Destange's interview. I thought that was a great interview. I'm very much looking forward to that product as well as I'm really managed to line up a couple of really banging interviews lately. So if you haven't watched any of those, you should probably consider doing that. Well, it's more likely for me to see it played at and maybe get in a game of John Company at SD Hist North than it is in the regular Montreal thing, which I would like to get up to stack at some point, but that's like a bucket list item, and it's not at the top of the wargaming events bucket list either. So I saw Obsession on a table at Buckeye Game Fest, and I have been told that Obsession is really good. Topically, it's not something that particularly interests me, and I'm not going to go run it down, but it's another thing that if the opportunity to play it came up, I would absolutely give it a shot. I made a point to do that a couple of times at Buckeye Game Fest, to no, I'm not really into it right now. And actually, fuck it, sit down and play. That's how I played Werewolf with the Players Aid guys, and they're great guys. We love those guys. They're great guys. I didn't buy Werewolf, and I'm not going to now. But it is a pretty clean coin implementation, and I think as a game design, I think it's pretty solid. So, well, that's the problem getting up there as usual. All right, folks, we have actually gone the full 2 hours tonight. So yay us. I do want to say thanks everybody for coming out tonight. If you haven't managed to do it yet, please do give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that. Most of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, and there's somebody here like that tonight. I'm pretty sure you know who you are. You should subscribe. We are over 10,000 subscribers, so I'm going to plan on doing a giveaway next Monday night's show. And there should be at least one and hopefully 2 videos, provided I get the slightly more complicated editing done this week. And of course, we'll be back with Dan, hopefully, for next Sunday's Chit Show. So everybody have a great rest of the night. We'll see you all again soon.